So good afternoon, good morning and good day. Welcome to Global Chamber London for our live Globinar, Leading Through the Great Resignation. My name is Katie Keith and I'm the Executive Director for the Global Chamber here in London. And we are joined by our esteemed panellists today, who I'm going to introduce in a few moments. Just a bit of housekeeping. Please keep on mute and keep your videos off. We're going to have a great conversation at the end where we're going to invite you all back to the stage. So I want to start with a question. Why the Great Resignation? Well, actually, it's been a topic that's come up quite a bit in my business network. And Julie and Jackie and I were having a conversation over the last few weeks. We thought, wow, this is something that people need to understand and know more about and how to work through the Great Resignation. I myself even heard it a lot through my master's project, where a lot of people were talking about reflection, where they see themselves. It wasn't just about work, it was about life in general. And I actually dug a little bit deeper and I thought, I came across an article by Ariane Cohen in 2021. It's a Bloomberg article. I'm happy to share the link with you. How to quit in the great post-pandemic resignation boom. And actually, what I uncovered was Klotz, who's a professor at the Management Texas A&M University. He was actually the inventor of the term, the Great Resignation. And I thought that was quite interesting. And there was a couple of key themes that I saw around the phenomenon. And it all attributed to, deep-seated people who otherwise would have left their jobs. They didn't resign in the first pandemic, but the uncertainty, that level of uncertainty was really driving those behaviours. So I personally experienced quite a high level of uncertainty in my own business, in my own career. A lot of people I spoke to experienced that as well. And it does make you reflect. But there are other possible causes to this. And I'm just going to be letting people in as we go. Wage stagnation amidst the cost of living crisis, long-last job dissatisfaction, safety concerns around the pandemic, and actually the move to hybrid working. That's actually been a huge disruptor as well. So there's so many possible contributing factors, but the one thing that is for certain, that the phenomena is real and organisations and leaders need to be prepared for the shift. So that does lead me into our discussion today, focused on the Great Resignation. And I'd like to now introduce our panellists. So Julie and Jackie, I'd like to introduce you both first because you have helped me set up this event. And I'd like to say, Julie and Jackie are co-founders of the Business Health Institute, and you specialise in helping organise.
Send it to Cesar and we'll get it all out for sure.
Sorry, let me just mute everybody here. We knew we were going to have a little bit of disruption here. Okay, so we've got quite a few people coming in. Let me just give a moment to let people in here. So look, Julie and Jackie, I just want to start from the top here. Co-founders of the Business Health Institute, specialise in working with organisations to manage their bottom line when it comes to employee health, well-being, stress and burnout. And actually, Klotz, who invented the term Great Resignation, said a lot of the attributes for the Great Resignation come from burnout in staff. So it's really quite interesting. So the team at Business Health Institute helped to balance the workforce pressure, establish systems for long-term impact. So Julie and Jackie, I'm looking forward to hearing your insights today and learning a bit more about you. I'd like to also introduce Paul, who's the CEO of Sante Group. Hi. Now, Paul, it's good to have you on today. Sante Group is a leading independent and underwriting group in the UK, but with a global reach, dedicated to making a difference in the health, wellness, insurance and employee benefits arenas. So Paul, you're going to be bringing your first-hand experience as a CEO of a group of companies working through change. So I'm really excited to hear from you today. And last but not least, Erica Hartz, who is the Global Head of Global Partnerships Director for Great Smart. Sorry, I'm getting people coming in the room at the same time.
It's also a bit of a long title, so.
We all love a good title. But look, do you know what, Erica? I'm really looking forward to hearing from you today because you're bringing a different perspective to the table. And I'm really keen because I know in recruitment, in times like this, where there is a shift in the workforce, you guys do really well from a business perspective. So I can imagine that you're busy. We heard Stephen on the call yesterday afternoon talking a little bit about the effects on your industry. But however, I'm looking forward to hearing what employers are looking for from you at this point in time and some of the statistics that you've got to share as well. So without further ado, I'd like to get started with some questions. And as an icebreaker, I thought it'd be nice in 2 minutes or less to go around the room and get your thoughts, predictions, even your concerns or beliefs around what you think the Great Resignation means to you. And I think that would be a nice way for us to start off the panel discussion today. So I'm going to start from my far top left. Jackie, you are the person I'm going to go to first. Would you like to share a bit more about what it means to you?
For me, Katie, my strong belief is that the Great Resignation has been bubbling along for quite a while. And actually, the COVID, the pandemic, has actually brought it much more to the forefront. I think the issues, as you mentioned there, about stress and burnout, those disruptors were already going on. But actually, I think the pandemic has, as I said, speeded things up and brought it much more into focus.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that personally. I think there's just been an acceleration of change because of the pandemic. So as a catalyst, that makes complete sense. What about you, Julie?
Yeah, I agree with everything Jackie said, as always. And I think there's kind of two camps. I think there's people that are open to, like, how has this change affected everyone? And there are people that still kind of are in the camp that things may go back to the way they were, and I don't believe that will be the case. I think people have experienced too many changes over the last couple of years, like you said earlier, Katie, hybrid working, the opportunity to reflect and review their own lives, and work life has become one. And if you're not happy, people have looked to opt out. So I think it's maximising. For me, it's about how you can optimise those people experience in the workplace, presuming that you've got the right people in the right roles initially anyway.
Yeah, some really good points there, actually. There is a shift and people want different things now, don't they?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, we've had a taste of this freedom. Why would we want to go back? And so, Paul, I'd love to hear from you. What are you seeing?
Well, I think we're all seeing it in the world. Things are going a bit mad, you know. You go to airports and there's chaos. You go to restaurants and things are going wrong. Hotels, people don't know what they're doing. And I read a stat the other day, I think it was Bank of England, that almost 1 million over 50s haven't come back to work after the Great Resignation because they're able to draw, some of them are able to draw the pension. So what's that doing to the world? That's potentially losing all the know-how. So whereby, you know, somebody who's quite experienced in a job will just be able to get a solution quite quickly. I know how to do it. You know, it might be somebody on A&E, an old matron or something like that, who says, right, that person needs a blood transfusion. Whereas you might have someone, you know, 2 doctors in A&E not knowing what to do, having to read a list to find out where the knowledge is. So I think the worry in the world now is that yet people in experienced roles are thinking, I don't need this anymore. I've seen a different world. So whilst it's great to have new people doing it, we're losing a lot of know-how. And I think this is a worry for the world in terms of experience and getting things right. So a huge job to do within the workplace of education, looking at staff retention and making people think, well, we understand things are changing, but how, you know, putting things in place to ensure that they're keeping hold of these people and say it's not all bad, but, you know, the stress doesn't have to be there. So I think there's a big job to do, certainly for people like us who drive employee benefits, Julie and Jackie who support it all. And it'd be great to hear from you, Erica, about, you know, how it's going in recruitment as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Paul. Erica, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, I would say that history tends to repeat itself over and over and over again. We've sort of seen similar things happen. The way I like to relate it, what we're seeing in the recruitment world is same with the housing market. You're seeing that it is a buyer's market, right? It's not a seller's or I'm sorry. Yeah, well, I guess it was a seller's market, not a buyer's market. It's the same thing with the candidate pools. Right now, it is a candidate market. It is not really a client market. And so it's so important for these clients to really, really retain their strong talent. And we are seeing that. And, you know, as we go deeper into the conversation, I can share some, you know, stories of what we've seen and some trends that we've seen, but history repeats itself. So there is always, exactly as Jackie said, there's been this buildup for years and years and years. And COVID really did sort of plunge us into this great resignation of where I'm worth more than what my company is giving me type of perspective from a majority of employees. And so it's really in their hands you know, when it comes to any type of opportunity. And so these clients are just sitting there, you know, and it's switched pretty drastically, I would say, in the last year. I mean, it's been building up, but in the last year, in 2021, we have seen a drastic change in the recruitment world of counter offers and people just being sort of like being able to pick from multiple options. And, you know, you're very surprised in the recruitment world right now of what you're seeing. It's a lot of surprises around each corner.
Yeah, I love that, Erica. It's a buyer's market. I feel like the power has shifted to the candidate a little bit more, and we're probably asking for a little bit more now. So what do you then do for that? And I think your opinions and thoughts have been really valuable in terms of how we segue into the questions. And I think we do go deeper now. And I'd like to lean on Julie and Jackie now. And I've got a question for you. And I know you're working with businesses and leaders on the front line right now. What are you noticing out there in terms of why they're seeking opportunities? Like, what do the business owners need to know about why? What's happening for the leader at the moment?
Well, as you said, as we've just had this discussion, Katie, we all acknowledge that the working world changed for employees over the past couple of years. And as Julie's just said, you know, there is a danger that perhaps some employers are possibly misjudging just how much. There are many reasons why employees are leaving, which I have no doubt everyone listening here could cast a guess at. But the specific issues, the ones that we're hearing about from our clients, is the need for a flexible working life, the overwhelming stress leaving people physically and emotionally exhausted. We're hearing lots about burnout, and that people are jumping ship because they can do, because there's much more salaries out there. You know, it's much easier to get a salary increase somewhere else than to stay in your same position. So rather than speculate, Katie, I believe it's important to find out what is the root cause. Only then really can leaders fully address matters and understand the why.
Yeah, I think the why is a big question, right? And each and every one of us, as unique as we are, have our own driving force that pushes us to a different destination. And just keeping in theme with that at the moment, how it's expensive to find out, you know, what's going on with your people. People are our biggest asset of our business in most situations. Like, what are some of the things that leaders can do to invest in that, or in terms of looking at ways to find out more about the why?
So, you know, one of my passions, Katie, is workplace and mental health. And if we look at stress and depression, they're strong predictors of high turnover. You know, we talk about emotional exhaustion. It ultimately affects job satisfaction and driving an employee's intention to leave their employment. What we must never forget, that an employee's fundamental psychological needs must be met to achieve a high performance. So if you think about it, if we don't feel safe, then automatically our nervous system will kick in and make us aware that we're under some kind of threat. I mean, do you perform at your best when under threat? We don't want employees in survival mode. We want them in a thrive mode. So these are some contributing factors for employees to be aware of. You know, mental health, about stress and burnout. As Paul mentioned there, vacancies not being filled. We're losing experienced staff, but also employees have been required to take on more work and responsibilities to fill those gaps. Making assumptions is a big one. Inflexible working. And I'd just like to finish off by saying, let's not forget that an employee can generally cope with a high workload if the resources outweigh the demands of their role.
Well, leading on, the resources are a big thing, right? Because there is a lot of stress and impact as the sort of like a chain effect, really, isn't it? So you remove someone from the workforce, they've left, someone else has to pick up the detail, and then your bottom line gets affected because you have to invest in recruitment, you have to invest in a whole lead of training. And then actually after that 3 months, that person might not want to be there anyway. So there's this huge cost and ripple effect. How do leaders know if they've got the right resources and frameworks in place to deal with this? Because I think that's a really big question. And Paul, I know we'll call on you in a minute because you're going through this yourself at the moment. But Julie or Jackie, would you like to talk about how leaders can look at that?
Yeah, I'm going to, that's a great question, Katie, thanks. And I'm going to flip that round for a moment. How do they know when they have the right resources? If you flip it, it's very easy to tell when people aren't connected to our business. We might experience a high turnover of staff and high absenteeism. You might even be aware of an all-round vibe of low morale around the place. Not so much with hybrid working, but in an office environment. And it's harder to tell, obviously, when you've got remote working. But how easy is it to tell when it's the other way around? People can look very busy when they're just sat at their computers, and I'm talking generally about service industry here. So how can we tell when people are connected and enthusiastic about their roles and their productivity is actually optimized? So we actually believe that people measurement is the only way to truly understand if your people's performance is optimal and that they're connected and able to achieve your business goals. If you ask any business leader if they've got a framework in place to measure their business success, they'll say, yes, we measure our numbers, our finances, our KPIs. That's a given in the business world. Yet measuring their people's experience is exactly the same, yet it isn't currently commonplace. And that has the same effect. It saves time, money, energy, and effort. So, what we help do is put those frameworks in place, future-proof the organisation in respect of people, and that leads to increased job satisfaction and retention of good talent. And
a better bottom line as well, I'm sure.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
When you're running a company, you are worried about that, aren't you? And Paul,
Always.
Paul, I'd love to hear from you, because as a CEO of a group of companies, working with people across multiple businesses and already going through this change yourself, I know that you've put some frameworks in place. Did you want to share a bit about the story that you've been through?
Yeah, well, the pandemic, which is ultimately why I think we're here, we've got a busy office, we've got 30 staff now, and they're all different. And we used to see each other every day. Now we had to flip our business straight away. Luckily, we did it before we needed to, and we had everyone working at home. We've invested quite a lot in our business being digital, so we'd already done some changes in the business. But actually, everyone we weren't used to having people working at home, So we did actually get involved with Julie and Jackie, and partway through the pandemic, we measured all our staff. Just to find out how they were doing. So I think the message really is, as a business owner, number one, don't just own the business, roll your sleeves up from time to time, go out and understand what your business is doing. I for one have been out since the pandemic and started to see clients again, rather than just leaving it to our team, just to understand, because as we evolve, and you're quite right, Erica, these last 3 months, I've seen a huge change in the way things have changed and the employee empowerment. So I think business owners should get onto the shop floor and sort of understand what's going on in the world. But the measurement side, which Julie and Jackie alluded to, is a really, really good tool, because especially for companies who want to put employee benefits in, how do you put employee benefits in, the right employee benefits, if you don't know what is required from the staff? So from what we did, we highlighted quite a bit of burnout, from the resource that Business Health Institute provided for us. But we were able to address that. I mean, we've got every employee benefit under the sun going, because that's what we do. We practice what we preach. But actually channeling those benefits, then we're able to say, well, you've got this issue. We've got this policy for you that you should. So we've got all these employee benefits. We've not been using them, but we've been able to sort of use the measurements and actually put a strategy in place for all our staff to say, well, this is where you go now to get yourself better. Obviously there's some people that were absolutely fine and dandy, but you've got to learn about your workforce, because your workforce are mainly at work. They do have a home life, but if you use the measurement tools that Julie and Jackie provide under the Business Health Institute, you understand also that, okay, work's great, but the problem might not lie at work, it might lie at home. So that's when that will affect the business. So you've got to understand this. And obviously what we learned was all data protective, But if you've got a sizable organization, you can pinpoint where the weaknesses are and the strengths, so that you can devise a solution. And it doesn't have to be through employee benefits, but it can be through management and mentoring. So I think the bottom line is, which comes to bottom line, is understand where your staff are. There are tools out there to measure them, and there is a solution there to correct whatever's broken.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story, Paul. I think it was really amazing. And I think what that brought up for me was, often when I've left an organization, they ask me why I'm leaving, and I say, it's too late now, I'm gone. And so there's something about find out earlier. And don't do an exit survey.
Yeah.
Do a survey of me when it matters most. So I think that's something really that's something through to listening to you now, Paul. And Erica, I'd love to hear your thoughts after listening to Paul's story. You're a global recruitment specialist company. You work with lots of different sectors, lots of different organizations around the world. What are some of the insights and observations for you when people are coming out of the organizations and where they go next?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say a majority of the conversations that we're having with candidates that are willing to leave, or we call them passive candidates in recruitment. It's the candidates that they didn't seek you out for the role. You sought them out, but they said, all right, yeah, okay, I'm willing to talk to you. And I would say a majority, if not all of the time, they're saying, well, I just feel a bit stagnant in my role. I haven't really gotten the promotions I've been promised. I'm not really doing anything new. And sort of going back to, this being a candidate market, it's individuals, it's employees saying, well, I want to do a little bit of something different. I want something else involved in my role. I want to carry many hats. I want to experience sort of different roles and really grow my career and grow my personal experience. And so I would say that's a majority of the time, is that these passive candidates, not the active ones, not the ones that are, eagerly trying to get another opportunity, but the ones that say, yeah, I'm a bit stagnant in my role and my company hasn't shown that I'm essential to the growth. So why don't I try to find that at a different company? Yeah. And that's what I would say is a majority of the time. And sort of going back to your question to Jackie of just, Jackie and Julie, of, how can companies do better at helping this, is that transparency and that communication.
Definitely.
It's understanding, if you have an essential team member on your team that, as hiring managers or C-suite, that you think, what would happen if they left? What would we scramble for if they left? If you have an employee like that, you need to be consistently showing how they are essential to the strategic growth of your company. And it doesn't mean you need to give them raises upon raises and growth upon growth year in and year out, because that's not realistic for a company. We're all very aware of that. We'd love if, you got a raise every single year and you got a growth in your seniority. But if they're transparent and they make you feel as an employee like you are a benefit add to the success of the company, that speaks louder than any paycheck or any new title that you could.
And that's massive at the moment, Erica, isn't it? People looking for job satisfaction has really come out on lots of surveys, hasn't it?
Being valued for what you do.
Think about, okay, well, I'm not being valued, and then you say, then the little things mean something. It's sort of like when you get in an argument with your partner, right? You start with one argument and you end with a completely different thing. And so right now we started to realize, okay, well, I was able to work from home. Now all of a sudden remote or hybrid workplace is now the decision maker when you actually take another job. So it's like, it's this big sort of ball of, I don't feel valued. Yeah. And then you get excuses later of why you don't feel valued. But really that needs to come from the employer, that sort of value and that communication, that transparency, and, making employees understand how essential they are to.
Well, I think another thing is, we've just gone through, we've done 2 sprints today in the office. We're 2-hour sprints with about growing our business, what product lines, and also our distribution. Who's been on that call? Who's been in that meeting? There's been 6 in each meeting, not the directors. Well, some of the directors, we've selected our youngest member of staff because we want to know what the youth want. So I think involving employees in things that you do, good, you know, the good ones, get them involved, make them part of something, and make them part of, you know, when it succeeds, it's like, you did that, you know, so get the employees on rather than directing stuff. If you've got good employees, use them to help you, you know, the business grow and succeed.
Yeah, it's about giving them some autonomy as well.
Absolutely,
For me, it's about creating curiosity within your workplace.
Yeah.
And empowering your teams to be autonomous in their work.
And if it's the small administrator who's come up with an idea and it goes, it's like, wow.
Yes.
You know.
And give the recognition, you know, that is a reward in itself. As Erica said, it's not always about monetary. It's about the value, it's about your contribution. It's also about belonging. And that comes back down to psychological safety. If we feel safe and valued, we feel secure, and that's when we can thrive.
And getting that right is the key, isn't it? And so some really interesting things coming up here around feeling safe and secure, being valued. And value looks differently for a lot of people. So asking questions about what makes you feel valued. But the diversity of thinking pool that you represented just now in that example, that was a really key thing, because we have a big workforce that we need to tap into, and diversity in our workforce is key to diversity thinking and growing. And so I really love those examples. There are a couple of other things that I'm thinking, and Erica, you might be able to help me, because there are going to be certain industry demands as people leave our businesses. We need to replace them. And so there are things around salary benchmarking and talent awareness. What do leaders need to now start thinking about, because the benchmark's changed? We want different. So what are some things that you can share around filling those roles?
Yeah, well, one of the first things just with salary benchmarking, we get that request a lot. Reesmark specializes in companies growing into new regions or growing their existing teams that are in, you know, different or newer regions, sort of growing them much larger. And we're asked quite frequently, you know, hey, what's, you know, the salary benchmarks? We pulled a salary survey and this is what it gave us. Is that accurate? And what I always like to tell people is whatever salary survey you pulled, that's the market value. That means that your current candidates are already at that. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think, oh, I can source in this region and I will get the salary. Well, no, you'll get more junior people because that's them growing into that role. So I would say the biggest thing is that take those salary surveys with a grain of salt, you know, to a certain degree. They are very wonderful guidelines, but they're also things that you need to do a deeper dive. Your industry isn't being played into that consideration. It's just sort of a role title. It also isn't considering what's happened in the last year. Countless times we're having companies that want to expand into Latin America. And I recently heard that for like a software engineer, they were expecting to pay 20,000 USD for a salary. And we were like, where did you come from? Like, that is so inaccurate. It's actually, realistically, if you consider EOR costs of getting into a new region, you're looking at maybe a 10% savings from the States to get into Costa Rica. And so these type of things really need to be, so one of the biggest things is, you know, do your due diligence, have multiple conversations when it comes to your growth, understand what you're growing into, and really have an understanding of the role that you're looking at. When we talk to clients, we say, we want to have a call because we want to understand the role. And they say, well, we just sent you the job spec. Well, that's wonderful. I mean, that gives us a lot of insight of the hard skills, but it's not giving us the insight of the soft skills. It's not giving us the insight of what do you want that's not on this job description? What do you want out of a person? And I suppose
it's understanding the culture of that company, is it, as well? You know, what does it look like?
So heavily, yeah. Where is the company HQ'd? You know, do you, if it's HQ'd out of the UK, do you want that UK company culture to be throughout the company? Or are you open to adapting to different cultures that will cause a stir in your workplace naturally? I mean, cultures are a beautiful thing, but they can cause different communication levels and all of these different things. And so, you know, it's just understanding your needs before you take that step, and then, you know, not just going with one source, really try to do your due diligence. And then when it comes to the talent, you know, pick a recruitment firm if you are going to go recruitment or internal that is set up for that region. Or, you know, whether it be from, you know, a city to a city, or a country to a country, or a region to a region, you know, just be ready and prepared to understand that culture beforehand, so that you can then come back and really appeal to them. Because these candidates that are going to be hired, I always love to use Germany and Japan. In my eyes, they are two countries that just culturally have been such a beautiful thing, where they've retained their culture so nicely. I mean, you look at the US and it's got a million different cultures, right? And so it's a true melting pot. And so you can sort of adapt to really anything within there. But when you look at these other countries that really have maintained their cultural sort of native processes and just pride, that's when you start to, you just need to understand a little bit more of where you're going and who you're hiring. And the candidates need to know that too. They need to know your culture and what you're willing to provide them on their cultural level.
Thanks, Erica. There's some really interesting themes here coming out. It's about sort of the stakeholders that are a part of your business. So Paul, as a CEO, right, you're not just the only person. You've got other stakeholders. You've got recruitment specialists that you need to bring in to bring
Absolutely. Yep.
Got the Julies and Jackies of the world that need to help you retain and understand what your people need. What does it mean to you? Because I know these types of investments cost money, right?
Of course they do.
And I'm curious, and I'm sure a lot of other businesses are curious of, you know, they've got 30, even 300 or 3,000 staff.
Yeah.
All is the same, right? It's about the per head investment or what you're looking to get on your ROI. What does that mean to you
Well, I mean, salary is fixable, you know, and you can look at the norm, and you can be within, you know, a certain percentage of salary. So that's fixable. But I suppose hearing what Erica was saying then about understanding a business and doing the due diligence, you know, you've got to do that as a business. I mean, especially when you're applying employee benefits and things like that, you know, we go in now to businesses, and we are very consultative. We don't just say, you know, here's some health insurance or here's some life insurance, and we go in and we understand that, because the best thing to do is put a measurement in first of all anyway, so that you can see where people are at, what the employees are like, what ages they are, you know, and then work out a flexible platform for them to sort of to thrive on. But, you know, in terms of recruiting staff for us, we do use recruitment people because, you know, we know that we will get right people and the due diligence is done. But nowadays we are very, very diverse. You know, we try and look at recruiting lots of different types of people, so that it fits with what we offer as a service. You know, if we've got lots of, I don't want to, you know, cast any aspersions, but, you know, elderly advisory folk who we do have in our industry, you know, the insurance industry in the UK has a lot of sort of 50 plus people who don't understand this world now. So when recruiting now, we're trying to look at different cultures, because we have a global reach as well. So we want to make sure that people understand, you know, culture and diversity, so that we can offer the best service we possibly can that covers off, you know, the current diversity requirements that all businesses should be adhering to.
I think it's also important that when we're talking about recruitment of new staff, it's also about retaining that new staff once they're there,
of course,
and
yeah,
getting that onboarding absolutely spot on. I mean, how many times has people come in and had a 4-week induction and then they're left and forgotten about?
I think that's happening more and more now.
That doesn't work anymore, Paul.
No,
you know, it needs that proper induction. You know, we offer a service where we measure at 3 months, at 6 months, at 9 months, and we're able then to deal with the teething problems that may be going on for that employee, so that they actually become an insider within the organisation. They understand the policies, the language that's being spoken. You know, and it's so vital, because an employee will make that decision within a short space of time whether they're going to stay or go.
Exactly. And there's so much opportunity now, especially, you know, you don't have to live in London now to get a job for a London firm in the UK. You know, you can work for one of the top law firms. You can be in, you know, the other end of the country and work for one of the top sort of capital London law firms. So I've heard obviously with stories that, you know, people have joined businesses without actually meeting anybody, and they've left and they've had a virtual leaving party for them, and they've never met anybody, you know, face to face.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just a different world.
Mm.
It-
But
there's
it's,
huge-
but it's a world that if the working world is measured and it's understood what's underpinning problems, we
Yeah.
get to the root cause, the why, and then you can then actually put in the strategic interventions that's needed. And sometimes, as Julie said before, it's tweaks
Yeah.
that are needed. It's not major things.
Well, it's like, say, if you are measuring it and you're thinking, right, there's a problem, you can fix things, can't you? So it
Yeah,
stops
well, you
happening.
can fix
Yeah.
what you know, can't you?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
you don't know something
Yeah.
that's bubbling. It's almost like the iceberg, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everything looks smooth on the surface. Actually, there's a lot of bubbling going on underneath.
Absolutely.
Let's explore what that bubbling is
Yeah.
and deal with it now
Yeah.
and
rather
on
than
that-
later.
On that note, Jackie, I was curious because as someone who hasn't gone through a process yet of investing in people, or maybe they think they are, but you know, they're not really sure. Can you share an example of how you have helped a company go through the early stages of assessing, or just the process of where do you start with understanding the why?
Julie, I'll leave you to answer that one. Since I've been talking, taking the stage on you, so let you have your say here.
First of all, Katie, I think it's just, leaders are welcome to reach out and just have an open conversation with us. What we're keen to do, as we've kind of expressed really, is help remove some of their internal challenges and the weight around what they've experienced, because people have had to be very internally and externally focused over the last couple of years. That's been very much heightened. And as Paul said earlier, I think people have to be open and curious enough to understand that there may be challenges with their people, there may be problems, there may only be small problems, but they need to know what they are and how to correct them. Then what they do is they need to invest in those people, because they're the fuel that drives the organisation. And that optimises, investing in your people optimises both your business goal and your financial returns. So kind of how we work, we recognise that leaders have had enough disruption over the last couple of years. What we want to do is buy into the process, leaders to buy into the process, and we've structured our service in a very time efficient manner. I hope you'd agree with that, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We demonstrate a philosophy that inspires teamwork, self-organisation and accountability for every person that works in the organisation. We're not saying it's a top-down, bottom-up. We want everybody to take responsibility, everybody to play their part. So just going back a little bit to kind of the work we did with Paul, really, we went into Paul's organisation. Everything's kind of automated. We had Paul's buy-in immediately. We rolled out the programme. The results, as Paul said, we took people out of burnout and we improved his productivity by almost 50%.
Yeah.
Which was a big figure for somebody who had already put a lot of strategies in place. That's fair to say, isn't it, Paul?
It is. We had a happy workforce. Don't get me wrong. There's no one upset with it. But actually, when you really uncover from doing this with you, it was like, well, these are great people and they're very happy, but they're that committed to the cause. They're doing a bit too much.
Yeah. And life, we take into account lifestyle factors as well, which was underpinning some of the issues there, Paul, wasn't it? Which you would never have known about, and was contributing to the stress and the burnout, because they weren't managing side of work.
Absolutely.
So we were able to work with that and turn that around for you. And as Julie said, and Julie's got the figures because Julie's a figure person, not quite in my head, but Julie can tell you how we reduced the figures down.
Yeah.
Right, Julie?
Yeah, that's right. And we were able to add 115,000 back to Paul's bottom line. And as Paul just said, his staff were in a good place. It's just that Paul had a really challenging period because of the pandemic, because you were in a growth situation as well, weren't you, Paul?
Absolutely.
And you were changing things internally. So he still wanted to make sure people could achieve his goals with all that going on. And it wasn't massive. we were able to target interventions, but a lot of them were small tweaks, weren't they?
Yes.
They weren't massive interventions.
And this is why you need to understand what your employees are like at home, because that's the knock-on effect, isn't it? And if those little tweaks, I mean, there's other things we use like heart devices to check how their health was actually, and how they were performing under stress, or how they were sleeping and all sorts of stuff. And it makes a massive impact when we correct it.
Yeah, massive.
And
getting to that why. It's always, for me, it's getting to the why.
Yeah,
Once you
absolutely.
understand, you can make changes.
Yeah.
But as a result of that, Paul's investment was paid back 10 times over. So he didn't lose any money by investing in our program. He actually gained, he had a payback of a return on investment.
And I think for the education of the staff to understand health and lifestyle is another massive thing for the future, because that will be with them forever.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will.
And Paul, to be fair to say, predominantly the challenges around burnout were because people were very committed to your organisation, because they love working for you. There was a lot of overcommitment, but you had your job resources in place. It was a lot around lifestyle factors. You had a lot of the resources in place. So I'm just making that point that it can be both, it can be either, but we focus on the key risks for that before we remeasure.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting hearing that, a real life situation in terms of how it worked and the payoff. And Eric, I know you've been listening to that. In terms of hearing a company like Paul's going through growth and probably going through those growing pains, how are you sort of supporting on providing the right talent? Because I know there's a lot of mechanisms, because you've got the internal stuff, and then you've got the bringing the new teams in as well.
Yeah, it's a bit of a loaded, I guess, question, because every client is just so different that every approach we take is extremely tailored to what they're looking for and what their approach existing is. We really adapt to our clients. And when our clients are globally growing or domestically growing, they have these issues that might come into play of hiring a new team, or being able to work with that new or existing team that might bring in this different sort of dynamic. And so it really is, it's customized to each client, but we're always there from an advisory service perspective of advising on the different cultures and the different teamwork environments. And like I said, that could just be domestic growth. That doesn't have to be global. It could be, they're just growing from one city to another, and that dynamic changes so drastically. So it's really setting, we usually try to set the expectations up front of everything that they're going to go through. Reesmarks likes to pride itself on the fact that we are the recruitment solution that can come in and set you up with an employee that's going to be for the long term. And that's why our process is so incredibly in depth. And then we're asking about those soft skills of the candidates that they would ideally want. And all of these things, we take a deep dive from day one of just understanding the company. I'm part of the partnership program, but my whole company also, sells the idea that we are a partner to our clients. We are taking on and absorbing what your company culture is like, the selling points of your company. And we're finding that within candidates. And we're finding that drive that naturally comes out in an interview process. So, I hope I answered that, somewhat directly, but it's very different for each client and each, country that the company is HQ'd out of, and where they're even going. And so it's very customizable, I guess would be the best answer. But it's really just us adapting to who we're working with.
Yeah.
And I really like that response, because I suppose to string it all together now, and as we sort of wrap up and open up to the audience, is that we're almost like a funnel, you see. We're always going to have people flowing out the back of our business. People are going to move on, but we need to maintain that funnel with all the resources and benefits that are in place. And for leaders of organisation and people who are going through change, it's just interesting to know what they need to do. There are experts out there like yourselves, people like you, Paul, living it every day.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get fixed overnight. The challenges continue on. And so I want to thank you all for your insights and sharing everything that you've talked about today. I did want to have a final group question. I'm just going to throw it out there. So based on your industry experience, what you now know, what is next? Like, what is going to be the biggest change from the Great Resignation, the biggest switch in how we work?
I personally think that what we've lost across the globe is company loyalty on both ends. The employees feeling loyal to their employer and the employers feeling loyal to their employees. I think we've lost that, and that's sort of the bubbling that Jackie spoke about before, is that it's been building up, I mean, you talk to your, you hear about your great grandparents or your grandparents and how they, had so much loyalty to their company for no reason whatsoever. And there was no reason to give that loyalty, but it was there. Well, now we've transitioned into, well, wait a minute, where's the loyalty to me? And so now we're at this peak of everybody saying, they're not finding that their company is loyal to them, so they're moving to the next. So I personally think, and I'm very hopeful for, that we're going to come full circle. And every company out there is going to truly understand the importance of showing loyalty to their employees. And there's going to be that retention.
Yeah.
There is going to be that people are going to stay at companies longer, but it's going to take the time of a majority of companies really making that step towards, how can I show my loyalty to my employees?
I think you've got to get those factors in balance, all the factors at play in balance. And I think that's really important, those job demands, those resources, and supporting your employees through what they need to meet your business goals. And I think if you get that back in balance, you'll have loyalty both ways.
Sorry, Jackie.
Okay, Paul, you carry on.
I was just going to resonate with Erica there, because employees now are empowered. And they will drive change, and they will drive positive change for employers to stand up. Those that didn't, we're seeing more and more new companies coming to us to say, help, I need some employee benefits. I need a health insurance scheme. I need to do something. Because the employees know they're in the driving seat. They're driving it. Employers are standing up. So I think you're absolutely right, Erica. It's going to meet somewhere. And, I'm quite excited for our business. What the recruitment business as well. And, Julie and Jackie, you're going to have a great sort of time to put your service through these employers, because they're all going to want to make sure that they're doing the right thing.
Well, I think what I would just like to say is that, I think, we're in a very reactive period in our working lives, in our personal lives, because of everything that's gone on. But actually, we can be proactive. Yeah. And I think we need to take a breath. We need to look at it, and we need to see the bridge. There's a bridge there that can link the experienced with the new employees. I think that bridge will come closer together, but it's going to take time, take commitment. It's going to take people being brave enough to say, let's explore, let's find out what's going on, and we can put it right.
Yep.
Lift the bonnet of the car up and see what's under the bonnet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Guys, and I think that we all need to do that now in our businesses. And I want to now open up to the audience, and I'm going to remove the spotlights now. I'm going to go to gallery. And if you're all on speaker view, you should all be able to see each other. I'd like to welcome you all into the conversation. I know you've been listening to us. It's been a really interesting conversation from my perspective. Please turn your videos on. There's a little key down here on the reactions, and it says raise hand. If you could find that, and if you've got a question, please raise your hand, and then we'll go through an orderly fashion. Who would like to ask? Oh, Farah, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, hi there. For Ardava, I thought it's not so much a question, it's actually just an observation, because the last kind of 50 minutes I thought has been utterly fascinating to hear the various individuals talk, but there's a golden thread that jumped out at me straight away that pulls it all together, and it's something that I myself have been kind of questioning over exactly how we do that. And it comes down to, and I wrote a couple of things down, so otherwise I'm stupid, I'll just forget it. But I did want to mention that. So there was one thing that Julie said about you've got the work life becoming one. And then Jackie, you spoke about performance is low when under threat. And then Erica mentioned about the fact that when it comes at the very end to loyalty and how people are now talking about, you know, what can you do for me as opposed to what I can do for you when you work. And actually, I have found that this all actually lies up to ensuring the difference between management and leadership, which I think is actually really lacking in today. And the fact that most people don't have any understanding in regards to how they can actually inculcate Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because actually all of this has actually come out of the fact that of the basic psychological and self-fulfillment needs that an individual has, if you're not meeting the most basic ones, of which let's say the basic ones are food, water and warmth is there, but actually get to the next level, which is safety, and you don't feel safe within the working environment, you're never going to get the results that you actually want. And COVID has actually, it's increased this, you see, because, you know, Forbes last year reported that, you know, in America, the gig economy grew 33% in 2020. That's during COVID. That's actually more than the US economy as a whole grew, you know? And then you've got the likes of, you know, FE News that are now talking about the biggest issue with mental health is actually people talking about feeling lonely, which then led to the inability to communicate and actually led to an inability to have work-life balance because they're at home with their laptops. Now, we're social creatures. We require social. So having that work-life balance also means getting back to work. And actually, whilst we're never going to go back to the old way of working, there has to be an understanding in the new way of working. And I just think it's fascinating because every single thing that you said that was all completely irrelevant has a golden thread, which pulls through the ability of you know, it then goes to the are you a generalist or a specialist in how you look at it, because, you know, now my background is it comes from a specialist that goes to a generalist, and most companies work from the other way around. My background is being a British Army officer, so ultimately we very much start off at a specialist and become generalist as we go higher up. But actually in the working world it's the opposite way around, which actually needs to be the other way around, because as you go higher up the company you need to be more of a generalist. And not having that ability to understand the difference in leadership management means that you throw away all of that basic psychological understanding of what should be there. So I just thought it was fascinating to listen to that, because actually it was a common thread pulled out. Sorry,
thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Good, wasn't it, Jackie? And you know what? There's something about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I've noticed that the peak of that is self-actualization. I think many people are reaching that, and they're needing that more. And it's interesting reading the theory around that. So very good comments, Julian. Would you like to share?
Yeah. Just I'll cut it short. Two things. I was walking around Tower Bridge area for a meeting, a really good meeting today and a lunch. But before that, I just looked into an office and I saw a lot of staff looking absolutely depressed in really bad positions, looking at their phones. And I thought, my word, I thought there was a big influx of interest to get back to the office. So that's one thing. And I thought, God, if there's in charge there, I'll be very depressed to see staff doing that. The second thing is just picking up on the army point. When I was in the police, I stopped a brigadier for driving badly. And I was hauled in by a chief inspector and said, you stopped a friend of mine yesterday. Do you realize he's a brigadier? And I said, very interesting. And I was only a young probationer at the time. But I said, well, that's interesting, because Dad's a brigadier. By the way, he said, when I tell my men to jump, when he tells his men to jump, they jump. I said, well, that's interesting, because the generals and brigadiers we know, they don't tell their men to jump. They will just jump anyway. And I think your army officer there would understand that good quality leadership is about integrity, kindness, openness and compassion, and the ability to listen. But Julie and Jackie, well done on that. I know you've put a lot of work into that. So thank you for opening up some space for grace.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Julian.
Now, we only have a couple of minutes left, so I'll give an opportunity for any more questions from the group. Comments, thoughts?
I actually have a question for the other speakers. We run into our own obstacles with generational gaps, right? Or different generations. Do you find that there is a different approach? Because in the recruitment world, we see our different approaches, but it's not really blanketed out by, you know, any of the clients, right? It's not a request or anything like that. But do you see that there's a different approach that should be taken for the different generations?
I personally think both generations can learn from each other, and that's the bridge that I'm talking about. I think the older generation can certainly learn from Gen Z, and Gen Z can learn from the millennials. And I think somewhere in the middle, that can work beautifully, because we've all got to learn and grow and expand. But sometimes we need somebody to educate us and teach us and guide us. And sometimes we need people to bring in new energy, a new direction, a new way of doing things. So I personally believe the two can work together.
Definitely.
It's a bridge for me.
Can I just add to that, Jackie, for Erica? Bringing Paul back in again, that what we found in your organisation, Paul, was that some of your younger team members needed more support through the pandemic, didn't they?
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's quite obvious when you say it, but the younger people, this was it's the first experience of work going through a pandemic, and what it highlighted, and it's fairly obvious when you say it, but we highlighted this, that they needed more supervisory support through this process. They needed somebody to lean on and to go to through the pandemic. Because,
and you know what? I think that goes back to what Farhad said earlier. We are social beasts, but that social desire reduces because everyone's used to this at the younger ages, aren't they? They're used to the phone.
Totally.
And the difficulty of understanding how to deal with people, situations and people face to face is becoming less. It's more on digital platform.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, when we're born, the first thing we want to do is connect skin to skin.
Yeah.
We're born to connect, not disconnect.
Yeah.
I think we should never lose that connection with people. It's so vital.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh, on that note, and my lights keep turning out in here because I was sitting very still, and they are shut my video off. But this is the virtual world we live in, and I just wanted to say we are at time now. And sadly, we have to end this particular conversation, but let's keep the conversation going. I'd love to give you all a minute now to put your details in the chat so that you can connect with one another and that you can actually start having further conversations, because I don't think we're going to solve the world's problems one Globinar at a time, but it certainly does help, because hopefully some of you out there right now are thinking about your business, thinking about some of the things that you need to invest into your people and your businesses, and hopefully you now know where your resources are. So as a global community, and those who are new to Global Change today, we welcome you. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation. We are here to educate, inform and engage and help you grow your businesses across borders. Please reach out to me. I'm always happy to have a conversation with you about how we can help. But I want to say thank you, Erica, Jackie, Julie and Paul. I've learned so much from you today. It is a topic which is close to my heart. And so thank you very much. And all of you, I hope you have a good day, good evening and good morning. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.